In this demonstration of Business Monitor, we're focusing on advanced correlation and the use of the global monitoring context. These are used when you have multiple dissimilar systems that are communicating with each other, and yet you have no overall view of that interaction. This is similar to a business process, but there is, in this case, no single engine like business process management that is governing and orchestrating that interaction between these systems. And so they're continuing to interact on their own, processing customer transactions, if you will. But we have no way of tracking the status of those, nor looking at an overall view of that enterprise flow, and we'd like to do that in Monitor. So establish the idea of phases or milestones or sets of activities that we want to measure, and then tying those to things that happen in these various systems that we're monitoring. So one of the things we need to understand is what the data is that is communicated between these different systems of interaction. Now, in some cases there might be a single customer ID or transaction ID that flows all the way through these to the end, but in many cases there's not. And even in this case, Monitor allows us to create this overall view and update it dynamically based on information that we receive from these different systems that are interacting. So we are receiving events from all 5 of these, and those are going into separate parts of the Monitor model. The events may look very different. They do have some amount of common data between them, but it doesn't have to be the same between each system. Then above these individual models, there's something called the global monitoring context. And this is a part of the model that takes the data from all 5 and brings those together. And from that model, we're able to take data and update the diagram and keep track of each instance of this enterprise flow. In order to do that, we need to define some of this data that is used to interact between the various systems. And so we do that with a wizard that's included in version 8 called the Global Monitoring Context Wizard. And so in that, we define the name of the phases or the milestones that we want to define, how long we expect them to last, how many we expect them to be, and then we define what data is common. And so we define a source metric and a target metric that ties those two steps together, if you will. And once we've defined that to the system, then Monitor can generate a picture that looks like this, that shows us our milestones or phases, and then some labeling is added for the identifiers that are used and the elapsed time that occurs as the flow starts and ends in each step. Also, icons and colors are added to represent the status. Blue with a check mark means finished, green with a cogwheel means in process, yellow means that it's more than 90% of its target time has elapsed, and red means overdue. And so these are just starter annotations, and you can change and modify these at will. This entire diagram is generated, but can be modified. So what I'd like to do now is flip over to a live business space and show you how this looks in a running Monitor setup. It has several tabs on it that represent not only the high-level view, but the lower-level views as well, and some of that data is exposed here. This first page in the business space represents these high-level or global instances that we've been talking about. And so it represents information from the hotel system, the flight system, the rental car system, the personal car system, and the miscellaneous system, if you will. And it ties those together in an overall picture of the enterprise flow. We've captured 5 instances of that enterprise flow. And so to see the update, you click on each instance that you want to view, and then the diagram gets dynamically updated, showing you the current status of that instance. And so you'll see the status icons have been added and the colors have been added to represent a flow that's been completed all the way through, and it exposes the path that was used, of course. And for each of the milestones, we have the elapsed time that it took to finish that phase or milestone or that set of activities in the enterprise flow. In each case, we've seen the identifier that was used, and you can see that it's different in each step. So this is one of those cases where there's no common key that ties all these together, and yet we're able to draw that picture of a single instance in Monitor. We go down to the next instance, and we see that a different path was used. We go down to the next instance, and we see that the enterprise flow has not yet completed, and we have one of our milestones or phases that is overdue by a long time, and so you see the color and the elapsed time that represent that. We look at another occurrence here, and we see the different path that's also not complete, and then we look at the last instance that we have, and we can see that it's not complete, but there's nothing that's overdue. In other words, this last step has not even started yet. So there's all sorts of annotations and additional visualizations that you can imagine based on this kind of scenario. But this gives you an idea of the kind of information that can be presented from systems that have not been monitored in this global way. The other thing that I want to show you is that along the way we're capturing the business data that makes sense, and so we've in the idea of capturing information about what hotel was used and the expenses that are involved here. We've taken some of the typical monitoring capabilities and run some reports against that data, and so there's a page here that represents the reporting against those hotel stays. And so these are Cognos reports that have been generated against that data. And so we've carved out the name of the hotel, the brand of the hotel, and then how much was spent by brand. And so those were our dimensions that were used in the Cognos report. So you can see that hotel spend by brand here on the left. And then we've taken another stab at that same reporting data, but we've organized it differently in the report. Now we're showing the time element as well as the hotel brand, and we've counted the stays instead of looking at the dollar amount of the stays, and so we can see the frequency with which we've stayed in each brand. Just a quick example of how you use some of that business data that you're capturing for these global instances. The other thing that we can look at is the key performance indicators that have been set up for the different parts of the process or the overall enterprise flow itself. And so we're measuring against the expected elapsed time. Then you can see our ranges here on target, at risk, or overdue, and the actual value of the average that's been measured here. Then over on the right hand side we've got another set of KPIs that are counting the active instances that are running, and you can see we only have two, those two that were not yet complete. You also have the idea of alerting against information in the lower level models or in that global model, whichever you want to do your alerting against, and we have some alerts here that have popped up. And then we have one last diagram that's also generated by the system, and this shows us a visualization of the enterprise flow and then puts on it some of the interesting KPIs that we've got defined. In this case, the average time for each of the milestones in our overall process. And so our average time to complete the interaction with the hotel system was 4 minutes and 22 seconds. Now, in addition to those 4 pages that represent of the global information in our model, we have also the lower level information for each of those 5 systems that we're interacting with. And so we're not showing all the columns available here, but this just gives you an idea that we are indeed collecting all the hotel information, all the flight information, all the rental car information from those separate systems in monitor models, and then that information in turn is flowing into the global model, or a subset of it's flowing into the global model, and we're showing it in these columns that are available at the top. That gives you a quick idea of how the advanced correlation can help us in depicting an enterprise flow and its status and tracking information as it executes through those enterprise flows in Business Monitor version 8.